The emergency session chamber stretched before them like a vast amphitheater of desperation. Its curved walls pulsing with the bioluminescent panic of 13 different species. Vorn felt the cacophony hit his sensory membranes in waves. Crystalline terror from the Zhek, the deep bass rumble of Kelthari anxiety, the electromagnetic shriek of machine consciousness in distress. He pressed his membranes flat against his skull, but the neural overflow still sent sparks of pain through his data implants. At the chamber's heart, Chancellor Zhek materialized in her environmental pod like a living prism, her crystalline form refracting the emergency, lighting into fractured rainbows. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of civilizations teetering on the edge of oblivion. The Devourer fleet has breached the outer rim. The words hung in the recycled atmosphere like a death sentence. Vorn's implants immediately began calculating probabilities, overlaying tactical projections across his visual cortex. The mathematics were as beautiful as they were brutal, probability cascades flowing like digital waterfalls, all converging on the same inevitable conclusion. Estimated arrival at Nexus Prime in 6 standard hours. 6 hours. The number burned itself into Vorn's consciousness as his analytical subroutines painted worst-case scenarios across his neural pathways. Even with full activation of the legendary galactic defense grid, their chances hovered around 12%. Without it, 0. The defense grid, 47 civilizations combined military might, sleeping in quantum suspension across the galaxy. Planetary defense networks that could crack moons. Stellar fortress, arrays capable of igniting dead stars. Quantum mine fields spanning entire systems like invisible spider webs of destruction. When awakened, it represented the greatest concentration of destructive force in galactic history. But awakening required a key that 47 different species had to turn simultaneously. Ambassador Kess rose from her environmental pod, her 4 arms moving in the ancient ritual patterns that bound their civilization together. The Charter demands unanimous consent. All 47 species must agree, no exceptions. Vorn's gaze swept the circular chamber, cataloging the desperate theater unfolding before him. Representatives from every member civilization occupied their specialized pods, some breathing methane clouds, others existing as pure energy matrices, crackling with nervous electricity. The Molten Republic's representative dripped lava in anxious streams. The ethereal collective's presence warped the air itself into visible distortion patterns. And there, at position 37, sat the human. Faye occupied a simple metal chair, no environmental controls, no translation matrix, no life support systems. She wore basic civilian clothing that looked almost primitive against the chamber's technological splendor. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders as she bent over what appeared to be a paper puzzle, manipulating it with a stubby writing implement that Vorn's database identified as a pencil. A crossword, an ancient Terran recreational activity involving word patterns and linguistic puzzles. While 46 species debated the survival of galactic civilization, the human was filling in letter squares. Representative Gorth's massive form shifted in his suspension tank, sending ripples through the specialized fluid that kept his mountain-sized body stable. The hegemony of Kelthar requires 3 days to consult our ancestral wisdom matrices. Such a decision cannot be rushed. Zhek's crystalline voice cracked through harmonics of disbelief. 3 days, the Devourer fleet will have consumed half the sector by then. Ancient wisdom exists for good reason. Gorth's words rumbled through the chamber's acoustics like tectonic plates grinding together. The defense grid has never been fully activated. The consequences could be unpredictable. Vorn felt time pressing against his consciousness like a physical weight. His chronometer painted urgent numbers across his visual display. 5 hours and 43 minutes remaining. The Telani had already transmitted their consent. His species understood mathematics with crystalline clarity. 12% was infinitely better than 0. But mathematics meant nothing if even one species refused. Representative Syl materialized as a prismatic entity, her form pulsing with algorithmic light patterns that hurt to look at directly. The crystalline consortium requires extensive harmonic analysis. Our computational matrices indicate 17 different outcome scenarios. Each must be properly evaluated. How long? Jacques' demand carried undertones of barely controlled hysteria. Minimum 8 hours for preliminary assessment. 8 hours. The Devourer fleet would arrive in 6. Across the chamber, Faye made a small sound, not distress, not panic, but a quiet hymn of mild concentration. She tapped her primitive writing tool against her lips, studying the puzzle with the same focus other species were bringing to existential crisis management. 7 letters, she murmured to herself, her voice carrying clearly in the chamber's acoustic perfection. Starts with D, clue says overwhelming force. Vorn found his analytical subroutines focusing on the human despite the chaos erupting around them. 23 species had now registered formal objections to immediate activation. Each demanded time for consultation, analysis, committee review, philosophical examination of moral implications. The human kept working on her puzzle. The ethereal collective's voice seemed to emerge from the quantum foam itself, reality bending around their words. Our transcendent consciousness requires 47 hours of contemplative alignment. 47 hours. Jacques' translation matrix began emitting stress harmonics that made several species cover their auditory organs. The entire sector will be consumed. Better to preserve our spiritual integrity than act in haste. That's when Faye looked up from her crossword. For the first time since the session began, she appeared to be listening to the debates. Her eyes, startlingly blue against her pale skin, moved from speaker to speaker with the same mild attention she'd given her word puzzle. When she spoke, her voice cut through the cacophony like a blade through silk. "Excuse me." The chamber fell silent. 46 species turned their various sensory organs toward the human. Vorn noticed she hadn't activated any amplification systems. She just spoke in a normal tone that somehow carried to every corner of the vast space. "Are you talking about the big red button?" Jacques' crystalline form flickered with patterns Vorn's database, translated as confusion mixed with mounting desperation. The activation interface is not literally a button, Representative Faye. It requires synchronized biogenetic authentication from all 47 species. Right. The bioscanner thingy. Faye nodded toward the central dais, where a complex array of genetic sampling devices surrounded a single activation panel like technological flowers around a metallic altar. "Just checking." She went back to her crossword. Vorn stared, his analytical systems struggling to process what he'd witnessed. The human had listened to 6 hours of existential debate, asked about the activation mechanism, received confirmation, then returned to recreational word puzzles with the casualness of someone checking the weather. Was this some form of psychological defense mechanism? Extreme shock manifesting as inappropriate calm. His database contained no comparable behavioral patterns from any known species. As I was saying, the ethereal collective continued, their voice warping spacetime with philosophical weight, 47 hours of meditation. The Molten Republic demands proper volcanic consultation. Representative Slag's interruption sent lava droplets spattering against his containment field. Our thermal prophets must be consulted. This requires one full planetary rotation. Planetary rotation. Jacques' harmonics reached frequencies that made several species cover their auditory organs. Which planet? our homeworld. 37 standard hours. More chaos erupted like a symphony of despair. The fungal networks needed time to spread spore messages across their collective consciousness. A process requiring complete synchronization across 17 billion individual organisms. The hive minds demanded worker consensus that could take days to achieve. The machine coalition required complete diagnostic analysis of all potential grid configurations, their processors already overheating from the computational load. Through it all, Faye worked on her puzzle. Vorn watched his chronometer count down like a heartbeat toward extinction. 5 hours, 4 hours and 50 minutes, 4 hours and 40. Each passing moment brought the Devourer fleet closer to Nexus Prime, closer to the heart of galactic civilization. Sometimes Faye would glance up, observe the latest speaker for a few moments with those unsettling blue eyes, then return to her word game. Her expression never changed, mild concentration, as if she were solving a moderately challenging but ultimately manageable problem. Representative Faye. Jek's voice carried new harmonics of desperation as she addressed the human directly. Earth has been silent during these deliberations. What is your position on grid activation? Faye looked up, clicking her writing tool once, twice, a small sound that somehow echoed in the vast chamber. I'm thinking about it. The survival of galactic civilization depends on this decision. I know. The Devourer fleet represents an extinction-level threat to all known life. Yes, and you're thinking about it. That's what I said. Faye returned to her crossword with the casual dismissal of someone declining a dinner invitation. 7 letters. Overwhelming force. Starts with D. Vorn's analytical subroutines struggled to process the exchange. The human had acknowledged the scope of the crisis with perfect clarity. She understood the stakes with crystalline precision. Yet she treated the decision with the same casual attention as her word puzzle. Perhaps Ambassador Kess suggested diplomatically, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of interspecies negotiation. Representative Faye requires additional information to make an informed choice. No, I'm good. Faye filled in another letter with mechanical precision. Thanks, though. The debates continued, spiraling into increasingly elaborate justifications for delay. 3 hours remaining. The quantum dancers needed time to align their probability matrices with favorable temporal currents. A process requiring precise calibration across 17 different dimensional frequencies. The Shadow Weavers demanded consultation with entities existing between dimensional layers. Beings so alien that their names couldn't be spoken without causing localized reality distortions. Every few minutes, Vorn found himself watching the human. She worked steadily through her puzzle, occasionally pausing to listen to a particularly heated exchange, then returning to her letters and words with the methodical precision of a master craftsperson. The telepathic union cannot proceed without consensus from our linked consciousness, announced Representative Mindbridge, their mental voice carrying overtones of 43 million individual minds, all talking at once. We are currently experiencing philosophical disagreements across our entire network. How long to reach consensus? Jek asked wearily, her crystalline form dimming with exhaustion. Unknown. The disagreement centers on fundamental questions of existence and purpose. Some minds believe the Devourer fleet represents a natural evolutionary pressure. Others view it as an existential threat. Still others question whether reality itself has meaning. Faye snorted softly, not derision, but amusement, as if she'd heard the punchline to a particularly clever joke. She filled in 3 more letters with quick, confident strokes. 2 hours remaining. The biomechanical synthesis requires complete integration analysis, droned Representative Gearmind, their voice a perfect fusion of organic confusion and mechanical precision. Our organic and mechanical components must reach unanimous agreement. Current estimates suggest 6 days for full consensus. 6 days. Jacques' harmonics reached previously uncharted frequencies of despair, her crystalline form beginning to crack under the psychological pressure. The mechanical components favor immediate activation. The organic components fear the implications of unleashing such destructive force. Resolution requires careful integration of both perspectives through 17 different philosophical frameworks and 43 distinct ethical evaluation matrices. Faye looked up again. This time her gaze swept the entire chamber like a searchlight cutting through darkness. She studied the panic radiating from 46 different species, the desperate gestures, the frantic communication exchanges, the steadily mounting terror as extinction approached with mathematical precision. Her expression remained perfectly calm. "Destroy," she said suddenly. Silence fell like a curtain across the chamber. "What?" Jacques' voice barely registered above the background harmonics of 46 different life support systems. 7 letters, overwhelming force. The answer is destroy. Faye filled in the final letters of her crossword clue with satisfied precision. "Been bugging me for the last hour." She set down her writing tool and stood up. The movement was casual, unhurried, the motion of someone finishing a pleasant afternoon activity. But every sensory organ in the chamber focused on her as she rose from her simple metal chair. "Okay," she said. "I've thought about it." 46 species focused every available sensory organ on the human as she walked toward the central activation dais. Her footsteps echoed in the absolute silence of the chamber, sharp, rhythmic sounds that counted down like a metronome toward destiny. No hurry, no dramatic gestures. She moved with the same casual purpose she'd shown while working on her puzzle. "Representative Faye," Jacques called out, her voice carrying harmonics of desperate hope mixed with terror. "The charter requires unanimous consent. Earth cannot activate the grid unilaterally." "I know." Faye reached the bioscanner array, its complex machinery humming with barely contained power. "But here's the thing about the charter." She placed her hand on the genetic sampling device. Blue light flowed across her palm like liquid starlight as the system read her DNA signature, analyzing the complex genetic markers that identified her as humanity's representative. The scanner's hum shifted to a higher frequency, recognizing valid authorization. I read the fine print. More lights activated in sequence. The central console began its startup sequence as quantum processors throughout the chamber recognized valid genetic authorization from the human representative. Energy patterns flowed through crystalline conduits like veins of pure light. Section 47, subsection 12, paragraph 8, Faye continued conversationally, her voice carrying clearly as 46 species hung on every word. "In the event of imminent existential threat to galactic civilization, any single member species may initiate emergency activation if unanimous consent cannot be achieved within 6 hours of crisis declaration." Vaughn's database confirmed her citation instantly. The emergency clause, written into the original charter 3 centuries ago, but buried so deep in legal language that most species had forgotten it existed. A failsafe designed by the charter's architects for exactly this scenario. "You've been debating for 5 hours and 58 minutes, Faye said, her hand still resting on the scanner as authorization codes cascaded through galactic communication networks. "I figure that's close enough." She pressed the activation button. The defense grid came online. Across 47 star systems, the sleeping giant awakened. Planetary defense networks powered up with energy signatures that lit up subspace like miniature supernovas. Stellar fortress arrays armed their primary weapons, weapons capable of cracking planets or igniting stars. Quantum mine fields activated their targeting systems, invisible nets of destruction spreading across entire sectors. The combined military might have galactic civilization focused on a single objective: stop the Devourer fleet. Tactical displays throughout the chamber blazed to life, showing the grid's response in real time. Massive energy signatures bloomed across the outer rim like flowers of pure destruction as automated defense systems engaged the approaching threat. The Devourer fleet, unstoppable for 3,000 years, the nightmare that had consumed entire civilizations, met organized resistance for the first time in recorded history. Estimated engagement in 47 minutes announced the grid's tactical AI, its voice carrying the accumulated wisdom of 47 civilizations. Probability of successful defense: 12.7%. 12.7%. Better than zero. Better than extinction. Faye returned to her chair and picked up her crossword puzzle. Representative Faye, Jek's voice carried harmonics of amazement mixed with dawning comprehension. You just activated the most powerful military force in galactic history. Yes, without consulting your government, without extended analysis, without philosophical debate about the nature of existence. That's right. How? The question came from multiple species simultaneously, a chorus of bewilderment that filled the chamber. How did you make such a decision so quickly? Faye looked up from her puzzle, and for the first time, Vorn saw something other than mild concentration in her expression. Not anger, not frustration. Something closer to patient bewilderment, the look of someone trying to explain a simple concept to particularly slow students. Someone had to, she said simply. But the responsibility, yes. The consequences, I know. The implications for the future of galactic civilization. Look, Faye interrupted gently, her voice carrying undertones of infinite patience. You all spent 6 hours talking about whether to flip a switch. The bad guys were going to kill everyone if we didn't flip the switch. So I flipped the switch. She returned to her crossword, 15 across, 6 letters, simple solution. Starts with O. Vorn's analytical systems reached computational overload trying to process the human's logic. She had treated the most momentous decision in galactic history like a routine maintenance task. No extended consultation. No philosophical analysis. No consideration of political implications. Just problem identification and immediate solution implementation. The tactical situation is evolving, announced the grid's AI. Devourer fleet has altered course in response to defensive positioning. Revised engagement estimate, 32 minutes. Across the chamber, 46 species monitored the developing battle with growing amazement. Tactical displays showed the defense grid adapting its strategy in real time like a living organism. Quantum minds repositioned themselves into novel geometric patterns. Stellar fortresses adjusted their firing solutions with mathematical precision. Planetary defense networks synchronized their targeting protocols across impossible distances, all because a human had filled out a crossword puzzle and pressed a button. Probability update, the AI continued. Successful defense likelihood, 15.2%. The odds were improving. Slightly. Representative Faye, Ambassador Kess spoke carefully, her diplomatic training evident in every syllable. Your species' approach to crisis decision-making is unique, is it? Faye didn't look up from her puzzle, her pencil moving with mechanical precision. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Most civilizations require extensive consultation before committing to actions with such far-reaching consequences. Why? The question hung in the recycled atmosphere like a challenge to the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Vorn realized that 46 different species had spent centuries developing elaborate decision-making processes, committees, councils, consensus-building protocols, philosophical frameworks for evaluating moral implications. The human had bypassed all of it with a simple observation. Someone had to make the decision, so she made it. The psychological burden alone, Representative Mindbridge attempted to explain. Their mental voice carrying echoes of 43 million minds trying to process human logic. The weight of responsibility for billions of lives would have been the same whether I spent 6 minutes or 6 hours thinking about it. Faye finished, her voice carrying absolute certainty. The Devourer fleet doesn't care about our decision-making process. She filled in another word with satisfied precision. Obvious, she murmured, 6 letters, simple solution. OBVIOUS. First engagement in 12 minutes, the AI announced. Devourer fleet has deployed countermeasures. Probability update, 17.4%, still climbing. Vorn watched the tactical displays with growing fascination. The defense grid was adapting faster than anyone had predicted, its artificial intelligence learning and evolving in real time. Individual planetary systems weren't just following preset algorithms. They were innovating, experimenting, finding new ways to combine their defensive capabilities, almost as if they were learning from the human approach. Identify the problem. Implement solutions. Adapt as needed. The grid is exceeding performance parameters. Observed Representative Sill, her prismatic form pulsing with calculation frequencies that painted rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. The defensive coordination is more effective than our mathematical models predicted. Emergency authorization protocols include adaptive command structures. Faye said absently, not looking up from her puzzle. The grid can improvise when it needs to. You knew this. I read the manual. Another silence, this one carrying undertones of species-wide embarrassment. Vorn's database confirmed that the defense grid technical documentation contained over 47 million pages of specifications, operating procedures, and tactical guidelines. Most species assigned entire research teams to study relevant sections over decades of careful analysis. The human had apparently read the whole thing during a 3-day journey. When? Jek asked, her voice barely above a whisper. During the flight here. Took most of the trip. You read 47 million pages of technical documentation during a 3-day journey. Speed reading. Humans pick it up in school. Faye completed another section of her crossword with mechanical precision. Basic skill. Basic skill. Vorn's analytical subroutines struggled with the concept. Reading and comprehending 47 million pages of technical data in 3 days was basic for humans. First engagement initiated, announced the AI. Devourer fleet has encountered advanced minefields. Defensive systems are performing within expected parameters. The tactical displays erupted in brilliant displays of destruction. The leading edge of the Devourer fleet met the grid's outer defenses like a wave crashing against an immovable shore. Quantum mines detonated in carefully coordinated patterns, each explosion painting space with impossible colors. Stellar fortresses opened fire with concentrated energy beams that could melt asteroids. The enemy fleet began taking losses. Probability update, 21.8%, better than 20%. Vorn's species would have considered those acceptable odds for a military engagement. Still risky, but within the range of calculated chances worth taking. The Devourer fleet is adapting to our defensive patterns, observed Representative Gearmind, their mechanical components whirring with computational stress. They're learning from our tactics. Expected, Faye said, her voice carrying absolute calm. They've been doing this for 3,000 years. They're good at breaking things. Doesn't that concern you? Not really. We're good at breaking things too. As if responding to her words, the tactical displays showed the grid implementing new defensive strategies with frightening efficiency. Minefields restructured themselves into novel geometric patterns that created overlapping kill zones. Fortress arrays began firing in synchronized sequences that generated cascading waves of destruction. Planetary defense networks started coordinating across multiple star systems like neurons in a vast mechanical brain. The Devourer fleet's advance slowed. Probability update, 26.3%, 1 in 4 odds, better than most species would have hoped for. How? Representative Gorth's massive form shifted in agitation, sending seismic tremors through his suspension fluid. How is the grid adapting so effectively? Our predictive models suggested much lower efficiency rates. Humans designed the adaptive subroutines, Faye said, filling in another crossword answer with casual precision. We're good at making things that can think for themselves. You designed the grid's AI, parts of it, the problem-solving algorithms, the pattern recognition systems, the tactical improvisation modules. She paused to consider a crossword clue, her expression thoughtful. Collaborative project. 47 species contributed different elements. Vorn's database confirmed this with growing understanding. The defense grid represented the greatest technological collaboration in galactic history. Each species had contributed their unique expertise: Kalthari strength, Zhek computational power, Telani analytical precision. But the central AI systems, the adaptive intelligence that allowed the grid to learn and evolve, came from human cognitive science. They had essentially created an artificial mind that thought like humans, practical, adaptable, willing to try unconventional solutions when conventional approaches failed. Major engagement in progress, the AI announced. Devourer fleet has committed primary battle groups. Grid is implementing dynamic defensive reorganization. The tactical displays showed something unprecedented in galactic military history. The defense grid was abandoning its original configuration, restructuring itself in real time like a living organism adapting to environmental pressure. Fortresses relocated to new coordinates through impossible space-folding maneuvers. Minefields reconfigured into mobile formations that moved through hyperspace like schools of mechanical fish. Planetary defense networks synchronized into fleet-scale weapons systems capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The grid was learning to fight like humans, adapting, improvising, refusing to be limited by preset tactical doctrines. Probability update, 32.7%, 1 in 3 odds. The impossible was becoming merely improbable. This is extraordinary, breathed Ambassador Kess, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. The grid is exceeding all design specifications. It's operating beyond any scenario we modeled. Humans are good teachers, Faye said simply, her voice carrying undertones of species-wide pride. We showed it how to think outside the box. Think outside the box, human expression, means finding solutions that aren't obvious, being creative when standard approaches don't work. She completed another section of her crossword with mechanical precision. Basic survival skill. Basic survival skill. Vorn began to understand why humans had been so casual about joining the galactic community. For them, adaptability wasn't a special talent, it was fundamental biology. They had evolved on a planet that required constant innovation just to stay alive. Critical engagement phase initiated, the AI announced. Devourer fleet has deployed ultimate weapons. Grid is responding with maximum defensive protocols. The tactical displays showed both sides committing their most powerful assets in a display of destructive force that dwarfed anything in galactic history. The Devourer fleet revealed weapons that had destroyed entire star systems, reality-warping cannons that could unweave the fabric of spacetime itself. The defense grid responded with coordinated fire from 47 different civilizations' most advanced military technology, creating overlapping fields of destruction that painted space in impossible colors. Space itself seemed to buckle under the forces being unleashed. Probability fluctuating, the AI continued. Current estimate, 41.6%. 2 in 5 odds, approaching 50-50. Representative Fei, Zhek's voice carried harmonics of awe mixed with dawning comprehension. Your species may have just saved galactic civilization. May have, Fei corrected, her voice carrying mathematical precision. Still 41%. Could go either way. She seemed remarkably calm for someone who had initiated the largest military engagement in galactic history. Vorn studied her posture, her expression, her vital signs as read by the chamber's environmental sensors. No elevated stress indicators. Normal heart rate, steady breathing. She was treating the battle for galactic survival with the same casual attention she'd given her crossword puzzle. How? He found himself asking aloud. How can you remain so calm? Fei looked up at him, and her eyes were clear, focused, completely untroubled by the weight of civilizations hanging in the balance. Panic doesn't help, she said simply. Either the grid works or it doesn't. Either we survive or we don't. Worrying about it won't change the outcome. But the responsibility, I made the best decision I could with the information available. That's all anyone can do. She returned to her puzzle with the casual dismissal of someone declining a second cup of coffee. 12 down, 4 letters. Logical outcome. Ends in E. Vorn's analytical systems processed her response, finding elegant simplicity beneath its surface. The human had reduced the most complex philosophical question in galactic politics to a simple decision tree. Gather information. Evaluate options. Choose the best available solution. Accept the consequences. No extended analysis of moral implications. No consideration of political ramifications. No attempt to achieve perfect certainty before acting. Just practical problem solving applied to an existential crisis. Grid tactical update, the AI announced. Devourer fleet formations are fragmenting. Multiple enemy vessels showing critical damage. Defensive success probability, 53.2%, better than even odds. Their breaking, observed representative Syl. Her prismatic form pulsing with computational excitement that painted rainbow light patterns across the chamber walls. The Devourer fleet is actually retreating. The tactical displays confirmed it with mathematical precision. After 3,000 years of unchallenged conquest, the Devourer fleet was withdrawing from their first organized resistance. Individual ships were breaking formation like birds scattering before a storm. Some were already jumping to hyperspace, their energy signatures disappearing into quantum foam. Final probability assessment, the AI announced. Grid defensive success, 78.4%. Devourer fleet withdrawal imminent. Victory. Actual, impossible victory. 46 species erupted in celebration that filled the chamber like a symphony of joy. Harmonic cheers that could shatter crystal. Light displays that painted aurora patterns across the walls. Chemical emissions that created rainbow clouds. Electromagnetic pulses that made the air itself sing with triumph. Every form of alien joy filled the chamber simultaneously. Fei finished her crossword puzzle. Fate, she said quietly, her voice somehow carrying through the cacophony. 4 letters, logical outcome. F-A-T-E. She set down her writing implement and looked around the chamber with the satisfied expression of someone completing a pleasant afternoon activity. 46 species were still celebrating, some already composing victory songs that would echo through history. Others were calculating the political implications of their survival, the new balances of power that would emerge from this unprecedented cooperation. The human just sat in her simple chair, looking mildly satisfied with a job well done. Representative Fei, Zhek's voice carried harmonics of profound gratitude mixed with species-wide awe. On behalf of galactic civilization, thank you. You're welcome. Your decisive action saved billions of lives. Good. How can we possibly repay such a debt? Faye considered the question with the same thoughtful attention she'd given her word puzzle, her expression serious for the first time since entering the chamber. Got any more crosswords? This one was pretty easy. Vorn stared at her, his analytical systems finally reaching complete comprehension. The human had just prevented galactic extinction, saved countless billions of lives, and activated the most powerful military force in galactic history. And her primary concern was finding more recreational word puzzles. I don't understand, he said aloud. Understand what? How you can treat this so casually. You made the most important decision in galactic history. Yes, the responsibility was enormous. Yes, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Yes, and you approach it like a routine task. Faye looked at him with genuine puzzlement, as if he'd asked why water flowed downhill. What else would I do? Most civilizations would have required extensive consultation, detailed analysis, philosophical examination of the moral implications. Why? The math was simple. Do something, maybe survive. Do nothing, definitely die. Easy choice. Easy choice? Vorn repeated the words, trying to process their meaning in the context of everything he'd witnessed. You reduced the survival of galactic civilization to an easy choice. Not reduced, simplified. There's a difference. Faye stood and stretched with the casual motion of someone finishing a long day at the office. Complicated problems usually have simple solutions. You just have to be willing to see them. She gathered her puzzle and writing implement with the same methodical precision she'd brought to everything else. Anyway, good meeting. Let me know if anything else tries to destroy the galaxy. I'll probably be available. With that, the human walked out of the chamber. No formal departure, no ceremonial farewell, no acknowledgement of the historical magnitude of what had just occurred. She just left as casually as she'd arrived, her footsteps echoing in the vast space until they faded into silence. Vorn watched her go, his analytical systems finally achieving complete understanding of what he'd witnessed. A single human had solved the greatest crisis in galactic history by treating it as a routine decision-making exercise. She had read 47 million pages of technical documentation during a 3-day journey. She had memorized obscure legal clauses that 46 other species had forgotten. She had activated the most powerful military force in the galaxy without consulting anyone, based purely on mathematical probability and practical necessity. And she had done it all while working on a crossword puzzle. Fascinating, he transmitted to his home collective. The humans possess a decision-making methodology that transcends conventional analytical frameworks. Explain. They approach complex problems as if they were simple problems. They treat extraordinary situations as routine tasks. They solve crises through systematic application of basic logic. This is effective. Vorn looked at the tactical displays where green lights showed successful defensive operations across 47 star systems. The Devourer fleet was gone. Galactic civilization survived. The defense grid had exceeded all performance parameters through purely human-inspired adaptability. Extremely effective. Recommend integration of human methodologies into our analytical systems. Vorn considered the question with new understanding. Could other species learn to think like humans? Could they develop the casual competence that allowed Faye to treat galactic survival as just another problem to solve? Unknown, he finally responded. Human cognitive patterns may be unique to their evolutionary development. Their decision-making process appears to be based on accepting uncertainty while maintaining practical focus on available solutions. Clarification required. They don't require perfect information to make effective decisions. They gather available data evaluate realistic options, then implement the best solution without extensive delay. This contradicts optimal decision-making protocols. Yes, and it works. Vorn began composing his comprehensive analysis, knowing that the human approach to crisis management would require extensive study. Other species would need to understand how humans could remain functional under extreme uncertainty, how they could treat impossible decisions as routine problems, how they could save galactic civilization while working on word puzzles. In the center of the chamber, the defense grid tactical display showed green across all systems. The greatest military coordination in galactic history, activated by a human who had treated the decision like filling in crossword clues. 7 letters, overwhelming force. Answer, destroy. 6 letters, simple solution. Answer, obvious. 4 letters, logical outcome. Answer, fate. The human had been right about all of them, and in that simple truth lay the key to understanding why humanity would always be the species others turned to when the impossible needed to become inevitable. When someone had to make the hard choice. When someone had to flip the switch.